We're going to look at the GCSE rules and how they apply to the new specifications to be awarded for the first time in June 2011. And what we're going to look at is some of the key rules, not in detail every single rule, but some of the key rules and their implications. I think there are lots of issues here for centres, and there's going to be lots of issues that centres have to address when it comes to the way they enter candidates. The first rule is that candidates must have an entry for every unit. When you do a linear spec, at the end, you sit papers in all the different parts. With a unitised spec, you can do units as you go along, but you must have an entry for every unit. You must do every part of the course. Candidates have to cash in to get a subject grade, and that's a new concept for lots of centres. They have to do all the units, and a centre may think, well, enter my candidates for the 4 units, but additionally they have to tell us that they want a cash-in, they want a grade in that subject. That could cause us a few problems this summer if centres forget to put in the cash-in. Because we will have subject outcomes, but only perhaps for a proportion of the candidature. If all the centres haven't got their cash-in in time, there'll be quite a few centres there for whom we haven't got outcomes when we look at our results in the summer. And that could be a problem. Rule 3 says that candidates must enter units worth at least 40% of the course in the session when they cash in. This is a problem the regulators have in going to a purely unitised scheme. You know, with GCE, you can do your units all over the place at any time you want, and you can cash in any time you want. But with GCSE, what they're saying is when you cash in, when you ask for a grade in that subject, you must at the same session be doing at least 40% of the course. They don't want to go too far away from the linearity. On top of that, when they put all the unit results together to calculate the grade for the candidate, 40% of the unit outcomes must come from that session where they ask for the cash-in. It's not just sufficient to do 40% at the end of the course and take your unit results from somewhere else. You've got to be taking unit results worth at least 40% of the total course from that last cash-in. You can see where the regulators are coming from. They're worried that unitisation may be seen to be a way of making things easier, because you can do things in stages, little bits as you go along, and you just pick the bits that you want. So they are putting this requirement that quite a substantial amount of the actual course must be done at the end, and quite a substantial amount of the course outcomes that you have to get your final grade come from those units that you do at the end. I think for lots of centres, you may well find that on a unitised scheme they end up doing it as though it was a linear scheme. They end up doing all their units at the end. Had you been here before Christmas, you would have had the joy of what we thought was going to be a big winner in the Christmas market in a game that we're trying to launch called Grade or No Grade. Right? And we'll see how well you understand the rules. So, here's a 2-unit course. Each unit is worth 50%, and that's what the candidate has done. In year 1, he's done Unit 1 in January, Unit 2 in June, and then in year 2 he's done a Unit 2 again, and asked for a cash-in. Will he get a grade? Grade or no grade?
Grade.
Yes. No problem. He's doing 50% of the course at the end, and he will get a cash-in, and that unit outcome, that Unit 2, will count towards his grade. The Unit 2 he did in June the previous year won't count, can't count, because he's got to have 40% coming from the end. So that was a waste of time in that sense. So if that candidate said, oh, I had a brilliant result in year 1, what's happened to it? Well, I'm sorry, it doesn't count. A course which has got 4 units, each equally weighted, each worth 25%. He does the 4 units as there and cashes in at the end, or asks for a cash in. Grade or no grade?
No.
No grade. Because he's only doing a quarter of the course at the end. So he's done all 4 units, he's satisfied rule 1, but when he came to his cash-in, he's only doing 25% of the course. So no grade. That, I think, is history. History's got a 4-unit setup with equal units. 4-unit setup again. That's what he's done. He's done Unit 1, 1st January, Unit 2 and Unit 3, 1st June, Unit 4 in January of Year 2, and he's asking for a cash-in in the 2nd year, June, and he's doing Units 1 and 2. Grade or no grade? Grade. Because he's satisfied the requirements, he's done all 4 units. Unit 1 and Unit 2 count between them to 50%, so he's satisfied the 40% requirement at the end. And that's what he will get. He will get a cash-in based on the Unit 3 and the Unit 4 that he's done, and the Unit 1 and the Unit 2 that he did at the end. The Unit 1 and the Unit 2 he did in the first year can't count, because he's got to have 40% coming from that cash-in session. And that's where Unit 1 and Unit 2. Okay, so that's what we call the terminal requirement. What you have to do at the end, and how that terminal requirement, those terminal units fit in to the final cash-in. Okay, the resit rule, what we call Rule 5. Candidates may resit each unit once before cashing in. They can have 2 goes at a unit. If you've got options, or you've got within a unit a number of possibilities, for example, in history, if there was a unit which had option 1, 16th century, option 2, 17th century, and so on, each of those would count as though they were a different unit. Or if you have a setup where there are perhaps 10 units, and to qualify for a GCSE you must do any 6 of them, yeah? All of those would count as different units, and you'd be allowed 2 goes at each. So you could have 2 goes at the 16th century, 2 goes at the 17th century, as though they're different things. But where the unit is tiered, you can't have 2 goes at the foundation tier and 2 goes at the higher tier. You can only have 2 goes at the tier. Now you can swap tiers, so you can have 1 go at higher tier, not do very well and decide that perhaps foundation tier would have been better to do, and so you can have another go at that. You can't say, well, I have 2 goes at the higher tier, now I'll try foundation tier and have 2 goes at that. You've got to have just 2 goes, or you can't have, rather, more than 2 goes at that sort of unit. Subject to the terminal rule, the best unit outcome will count towards the qualification. So if you've got 2 units, if you had to go to a unit twice, and you've got 2 unit outcomes, the best will count as long as you can satisfy the terminal rule. Okay? The game gets interesting as you go along. Okay, grade or no grade? 2 unit course, each unit is worth 50% of the total. Will you get a grade? Yeah. Yeah, he's done 2 units at the end, and that's for a cash-in, so he's done all the units. He's doing at least 50% at the end. He's doing all at the end, in fact. So in this case, yeah, he's got to have Unit 2 coming into play. He's got to count that. So this time he's got 2 Unit 1s, either of which could go towards the final outcome. Yeah? So he's allowed his 2 goes at Unit 1, and this time he can take the better of those 2 outcomes. 2 unit course, each unit's worth 50%. That's what he's done. Grade or no grade? I'm hearing mixed responses. Grade. Yeah? Unit 2 is worth 50%, so he's satisfying the terminal rule. He's done Unit 1 and Unit 2, so he'll get a grade. Okay? He'll also get a grade in Year 1, because he's cashed in Year 1. Yeah? And in Year 1, he will get a grade because he's got the Unit 2, and he can take the best of his 2 Unit 1 outcomes. Yeah? In Year 2, he's asked for a cash-in. He's satisfied the terminal rule. He's got his Unit 2 there, which accounts for more than 50%. he's got his Unit 1, and he's had 2 goes at Unit 1, that's all right. So he hasn't contravened the resit rule, and he can take the better of those 2 unit outcomes. What can't he do? Well, he can't use that Unit 2 in the first year, yeah? Because on this one, he's got to have, in his second cash-in, he's got to have something which gives him 40% of the outcomes. So on that second cash-in, it's that Unit 2 that's got to count. But he can still take the best of his 2 Unit 1s. Yeah? Grade or no grade?
Grade.
Grade. Easy in year 1, he's done 2 units, once each, satisfies the terminal rule in year 1, and he'll just take the outcomes from Unit 1 and Unit 2. In year 2, he certainly satisfies the terminal rule, he's doing it all again. Something from that year 2 has got to count. So he's got a choice here. He can pick up the Unit 2, because that will give him 40%, and he can pick up the better of his 2 Unit 1 outcomes. But equally, he can pick up the Unit 1 and the better of his 2 Unit 2 outcomes. Yeah? Our systems will be written to look at all those possibilities. Yeah? So there's a candidate where the result is a matter of looking at permutations. But he will get a cash-in and an outcome in year 1 and in year 2. And that's the case where he will get the benefit in year 2 of everything he's done. Because he's happens to repeated everything in year 2, the cash-in. I think you can begin to see that the applications of these might present a bit of head-scratching in certain centres as to know what's the best thing to do. Yeah? Personally, I'm not particularly worried about June 2011 because people haven't had a chance to do very much. Our total entry last year in individual units was quite small. Candidates didn't do particularly well because they were not particularly well prepared at that stage. And I suspect a lot of them will be re-entering this summer. There are very few of our specs where the breakdown of units is such that it's like the history one that I talked about where they got 4 units of 25%. A lot of the subjects, there's only 2 units, and they're each worth at least 40%. My bigger worry is what might happen in 2012 if you've got substantial year 10 entries this June, and have centres thought about the implications that has for the resits subsequently. One last go. Grade or no grade?
No.
No grade. He's asking for a cash-in. He's not doing anything at the time of the cash-in. It's a nice easy one. Grade or no grade?
Grade.
No grade. Why not? It's because he's had 3 goes at Unit 1. Not allowed 3 goes at Unit 1. Yeah? He's had 3 goes. We should have something in our system that reminds him, this is your 3rd go at Unit 1. Something wrong there. You can get around that. Rule 7. The 2-go count restarts after each cash-in. If you played Mornington Crescent, it's a bit like that. We can add rules. Subject to the terminal rule, the better of the 2 most recent outcomes counts. Grade or no grade? Okay, grade or no grade? Each unit here is worth 50%. Candidate does Unit 1 in January of the first year, then he does Unit 2 and Unit 1 again and asks for a cash-in. And then in year 2, he repeats Unit 1 and Unit 2 in June and asks for a cash-in. Grade or no grade?
Grade.
Yeah. That's no problem in year 1. He's done the 2 units, he's done everything at the end, so he's satisfied the terminal rule, and he will pick up a cash-in based on Unit 2 that he does in June, plus the best of the 2 Unit 1 results. Year 2, he can... Now, you see, the fact that he's done Unit 1 3 times doesn't matter because he's cashed in the first time. And so he can start the count again. But we'll only pick up the last 2 Unit 1. Though he's done it 3 times, we can't go back to the first time. We've got to pick up the most recent units that he's done, so it's those last two. So you'll get a cash-in based on the Unit 2 in Year 2 and the best of the two recent Unit 1s. Or he could pick up the most recent Unit 1 and pick up the best of his Unit 2s. Either of those is possible, whichever gives him the better grade. So you can get round that resit rule by cashing in. There's nothing stopping you in this system, or candidate, having enough bits of paper to decorate his wall with cash-ins. So he'll have lots of cash-ins, have lots of grades, as long as at each stage is in line with the terminal rule and the resit rule. A few last odds and ends associated with the rule. The same unit outcome can count towards more than one qualification level. In other words, if you've got a short course and a full course, you can count a unit outcome towards the short course, and that same unit outcome can count towards the full course, or a single course and a double course. But what you can't do is count a unit outcome to two different qualifications at the same level. In other words, if there was a unit that you could do as part of a biology course and a human biology course, you'd have to do that twice, one for the human biology and one for the biology. You can't do it once and say, I've done it once and I'll count that outcome towards biology and I'll count it towards human biology. Rule 9, where a candidate has entered for a unit but is absent, we will give them 0, and that will be available for the cash-in. So they've done all the units in theory, they've entered for all the units, it's just that on the particular day they fell over and broke the leg and didn't make it to the exam or whatever, they were absent. We will count as 0, but what we will not do is count that as an attempt, because they didn't actually get to the exam and do anything. So when it comes to counting how many goes they've had, it won't count. What we had here is a brief run-through of the rules. You can download from the JCQ website a document which goes through those rules in a sort of question and answer format. And that is available, and there's the website address. And I think that document goes through the key important features of these GCSE rules.